Hey all, I have a special treat for you today. Here with two musical legends, actually literally standing in the shadows of musical giants right now, me not being one of them, with Frank Morelli, and that is not a typo on the screen. You're actually seeing two Frank Morellis talking to each other right now, and Keith Oxman, who I will introduce to you in just a second. The reason why we are here today is to discuss a number of things, mostly music, a little bit about teaching, and a lot of it will be centered around a book that I have written that is about to come out in a few months. That book is called On the Way to Birdland. I have a snazzy new postcard that some of you out there watching will be receiving pretty soon. It is basically a young adult novel about a boy named Cordy Wheaton. He's 16 years old, and he's going through a lot of trauma in his life, basically from every angle. He has his father who has been diagnosed with a terminal disease. His brother has left the family estranged and has gone to somewhere unknown. And Cordy, all he wants to be able to do is bring his family together. He's never really left the confines of his own hometown, which happens to be High Point, North Carolina, where I am actually sitting right now. It is also my hometown. And he goes out on the road in search of his brother with absolutely no real idea of where he may be, other than the fact that he received a text message from him where his brother is sitting on the steps of a very famous house that happened to be the house of John Coltrane, the famous jazz legend, who also was raised in the same hometown as me. And Cordy Wheaton, this 16-year-old, has a huge appreciation for John Coltrane, jazz music, philosophy, and the idea of world religion that comes through in John Coltrane's teachings and even in his music. And he uses that kind of as a buffer to help him get to the end of his journey where he hopes to find his brother. And I don't know, it was a really enjoyable book to write. It taught me a lot about John Coltrane, especially ever since the first day that I lived here and walked upon his statue in the center of town and just wanted to learn more about the man. But it also taught me a lot about myself and the idea of being able to get outside of your shell, which becomes a major theme in the story. The idea of being able to get out there, meet people, learn about experiences in different ways, and how that helps to round out your life and make you realize what it is that you want to be able to do going forward. It also helps you to understand what your self-worth is. So I had a chance to share that book with both Keith and Frank, and they shared some really positive feedback. And our conversation today, the purpose of it is to kind of draw together the amazing power of music, the transformative power of being a teacher and an educator, and a lot of their own experiences of how music has played into that. And of course, to talk a lot about the master, John Coltrane. Let me just introduce you to these two gentlemen. On the left of your screen, you see Frank Morelli. It's incredible to be sitting here with him. I don't know if he remembers this, but when I first graduated college, I actually called him because I work for a publishing company, and my job was to find reviewers for books, and I saw my name on the list. So I decided, being a snarky, 21 or 22-year-old, that I was going to call him up. And then I found out that he's one of the most famous bassoonists on earth. He was also one of the nicest guys I've ever talked to. So sitting here with him after all these years, about 20 years ago, Frank, sitting here with him after all these years to talk about music and something that he does on a professional level is just incredible to me. A little bit more about Frank. He is obviously a bassoon soloist, one of the greatest in the world. He's a chamber musician. He's a teacher, which he obviously treasures in his life and has talked to me about that. He's also the first bassoonist to ever be awarded a doctorate by the Juilliard School. You may have heard of that school a few times. He's a member of the Orpheus Chamber Orchestra. There's actually a chapter in Birdland literally titled Orpheus, so I thought that connection was kind of cool. He's part of the woodwind quintet Windscape, and has made 9 solo appearances at Carnegie Hall. He's also a faculty member at Juilliard School, the Manhattan School of Music, SUNY Stony Brook, and was recently named a distinguished lecturer at the Aaron Copland School of Music at Queens College, the City University of New York, where I happen to be also an alumni, where I got my education degree. And he has 4 solo albums out. He even won a Grammy back in 2001 for the Orpheus album Shadow Dances, in which he was featured. And he even played at the White House. Some interesting things I found out. The Miami Herald once hailed Frank Morelli as a breathtaking virtuosity. And Gramophone magazine said that Morelli's playing is a joy to behold, and I would have to agree with them. And sitting next to him virtually here is Keith Oxman. He is an absolute Denver jazz scene icon, a notable saxophonist with a dozen records under his belt with the label Capri. And of course, all three of us are teachers. Keith is also a high school instrumental music teacher, which I really appreciate. I know how hard it is to learn how to play instruments. So to be able to teach students that must really be a satisfying, rewarding experience. Keith's also played with notable artists like Sonny Stitt, Buddy Rich, Red Holloway, Dave Brubeck, and Art Blakely. And his latest album, which came out in 2020, called Two Cigarettes in the Dark, he was joined by legendary sax man Houston Person on the album. And Downbeat magazine said that the album is an excellent reminder that quality jazz is being made all over the place. Reviewer Edward Blanco from All About Jazz called the work one of the finest albums of the contemporary jazz scene today. And one thing that you might not know, and in fact hasn't really been released yet, is that these two gentlemen have been working on an album together. One of the greatest titles I've heard in a long time, The Oxmo Incident. If you ever have a chance to talk to either one of these gentlemen together, which I just did right before this interview, you will definitely appreciate the title of it being an incident. It comes out in June of 2021 this year from Capri Records, and I'm really looking forward to picking up a copy of it. So welcome, gentlemen. Thanks for joining me today. Thanks for reading my book and also agreeing to converse with me today about such an important topic, music, jazz, and how it plays a role in America, I think, overall. Frank, I had a couple questions for you. My protagonist in my story, On the Way to Birdland, Cordy Wheaton, he's on this epic journey that in many ways is inspired by music. And you could tell from the very first page that it's going to shape his life when he going forward. So can you tell us a little bit about how you got inspired by music and the journey that it set you on?
Well, first of all, it's great to be here, and we never have been together, especially since the pandemic. And this is really the first time I'm with my namesake, another Frank Morelli.
You're everywhere.
An incredible, wonderful thing. And I love the fact that we've made this connection. And how many connections there are beyond just the fact that we share a name. And
it's a really small world, Frank. Every time I think about it, it just blows my mind.
And we both have dads. Mine has passed away of the name Frank Morelli. It's pretty incredible. But in terms of the story, my Frank Morelli, the original Frank Morelli, my dad, he left high school in the 9th grade, and that would have been in the 1930s, and went to work in the garment business. But when he had a family, he wanted to leave the South Bronx and moved out to Long Island, a suburb of New York City, to these little houses they were building, post-World War II GI Bill houses, little tiny Cape Cods. And that's where I grew up, in Massapequa, Long Island. And in the 4th grade, and my parents, my mom made it through high school, but they wanted their sons to go, as is the immigrant. They were first generation Italian Americans. My grandparents all came from Italy with nothing. Common story. So anyway, not to make this go on for too long, they moved to Long Island. They moved to Massapequa, good school district, and my brother and I were expected. I had an older brother who also played saxophone, very much like in the story. And we were expected to do well in school. Our job was that they wanted us to be properly educated, go to college, to go on to be, we were the first in our generation, the first in the family, in my generation, the ones that ever went to college or graduated from it. So 4th grade, you pick an instrument. So my first love was a saxophone, but believe it or not, I'm 6'3" now, but I was little at that time. And so I started on a clarinet, a metal clarinet that sits in this room now as a lamp. It was a metal clarinet. And in one piece clarinet with a slight bend in it. I don't know how the bend got in it, but a slight bend. And that was my 4th grade instrument. In the 5th grade, I amped it up to the alto sax. And fast forward to getting into high school, and they needed bassoon players, like in the band, an orchestra. And it's like, hey, Morelli, you want to try the bassoon? The bassoon? I don't know. Okay, you know. And so because of the music education system, I was presented at the same age my dad left school to work. I was presented with a bassoon in ninth grade, you know.
So you didn't start playing your instrument until ninth grade?
Not the bassoon. I was playing a woodwind, and they're related from the fourth grade. But I liked it, but even when I took up the bassoon, this was not like my life's work. This was total serendipity. So to make a long story short, you know, I grew up during the moonshot, the era of the moonshot. I thought I was going off to like some sort of engineering school or science, or maybe even become a math teacher or something like that. I was pretty good at that stuff. Not great, but. And then the music bug hit me. And so my first goal in life, when I left high school, I went to a state school to become the music ed. I thought I was going to become a music educator, band director, like my band director, you know. And in the course of doing that, talk about stretching or leaving a cave, something you talk about in your book, which is so important. In my first year, the thing I knew, I was totally unsophisticated about music. Believe me, totally about really any kind of music. And I didn't know really from Coltrane. I had heard the name, but I wouldn't say I knew from Coltrane at that time in my life. I was aware of some other saxophone players, old timers sort of, but not Coltrane. And I went off, and while I was at the state school, which is a very good school, I had a feeling that what I needed to do was to really better myself as a musician if I was going to be a music educator. And looking at you two guys, an author of your level of expertise, a sax player, an artist, not just exactly a composer, a musician of Keith's level, and the fact that you share your knowledge in the in the education system is a testament to who you are and the value that you bring to society. And so I got the benefit of a really great band director who had been like in the Navy band during World War II, one of the Navy bands, a real serious dude. And so I'm in college. I'll make it quick. From there, I'm in college, and I felt I need to become a much better musician if I'm going to be a band director. And so I switched down to New York City to the Manhattan School of Music. And I met up with my teacher, like the teachers that Cordy meets along the way, that changed his life. And the man named Stephen Maxim, who I honor to this day. Of course, he's gone now, but I think of him every day. And in the course of just trying to become a better bassoonist, still with the goal of becoming a music educator, I fell off that career path and became whatever you want to call it, just a bassoonist.
Keith, got to bring you in here. And I want to ask you a similar kind of a question about that I just asked Frank, because your journey of playing the saxophone really reminds me a lot of Cordy Wheaton's older brother, Travis, whose journey playing the saxophone kind of hit a snag, but that it was at one point something that was feeding him and helping him to grow. So I wanted just to know what attracted you, what brought you into the world of music initially, and why did you decide to choose the saxophone? Like, what was it about the sax that is why you decided that was your instrument?
Thank you so much for having me here today. This is going to be a ball. I'm going to enjoy this. My story, it's probably not so romantic. I didn't start on the saxophone. I started on the guitar. I was born in '58, so by the time the Beatles were coming here, I was 6 years old, and I knew who they were, and I was obsessed with those guys, especially John Lennon, and I wanted to be John Lennon. And so I got this guitar, and I didn't practice much though, but I was working on trying to straighten out my Jewish curly hair to look like his, and I spent more time with that than I did with the guitar. But that I started too young. I couldn't get my arm around it, and finally fourth grade came. Well, actually third grade. And the band teacher at my elementary school played a bunch of instruments for us. And he played Herb Alpert's The Spanish Flea on the baritone. And I'm still in touch with with my elementary school band teacher, as a matter of fact. Just talked to him a couple weeks ago. so I decided I was going to do the band, and I didn't have a lot of choice. My mom asked him, what is the instrument that is least likely to annoy the neighbors? Because I was thinking about drums, and he said, no, get him clarinet. So whatever. I didn't know a clarinet from a drum anyway. So I started on clarinet, and then my folks got me a private teacher. And a couple years into it, I really wanted saxophone because there was this really cool girl at our school that played saxophone. And I thought the instrument looked great. I had a crush on her, and I want to be a sax player. I'll move out of the clarinet section and sit next to this young lady. And I was last chair. There were 10 clarinet players, and I was always 10th. Horrible. And so anyway, my mom got me a private teacher on clarinet, and I didn't practice much. And she said, I was sort of, at that time, I was sort of thinking I wanted to be a musician. She said, well, how are you going to do that if you don't practice? Well, we play at school. It's good enough. And I didn't really spend much time, but I knew I wanted to be a musician. And that slightly changed around the time of my bar mitzvah, where I started thinking about becoming a rabbi, but then it changed back because my father took me to one of the seediest, dumpiest jazz clubs you could ever imagine. And the characters I saw there, and the excitement in the music, that did it for me. Plus also hearing a record of Charlie Parker for the first time, it went through me like an absolute laser. And that was really what did it. But I found out years later that this private teacher that I had said to my mom, your son is probably the least talented student I've ever had, and said, he's just, he's probably the worst student I've had. I don't think there's any hope for him, and basically maybe he should just think about, doing something else. And I really wanted a saxophone, but my folks didn't want to invest because I wasn't practicing clarinet. And we were on a bike ride the summer of 6th grade. Or springtime, and we went to my cousin's house, and I happened to go in, and my two friends who played clarinet, they were outside throwing a frisbee around, and I don't know how it came up, but I said I really want to play saxophone, but they're not gonna. My cousin said, well, I quit. I've got mine up in the attic. You want it? So I got a saxophone, and that and Charlie Parker really started. Really making me think about that. And meanwhile, this teacher that, said that I had no ability, he passed away, unfortunately, and I adored him. I still think about him. But meanwhile, we had a middle school teacher who was really a hard-nosed guy. I mean, you had to work. And my mom said, would you take him on as your student? And he made it very clear to me that if you show up and you're not prepared, you can't come back to my house. I mean, it was one of those things. He was not interested in any kind of, and his assignments were difficult. They were time consuming. And he really changed my life. Well, he also introduced me to Coltrane, but he introduced me to the wrong era. I shouldn't say the wrong era for a young teenager. He put this recording on of Impressions, and I said, well, the guy can't play. I said, he's horrible because he wasn't playing the way Charlie Parker played. So, and I didn't have any understanding of what was going on. And he said, well, you have a lot of work to do. You have a lot more listening to do. And I just never did like that at that time. I just couldn't get with that. So there was a guy that worked for my father. My father had a wholesale record and tape distributorship. And this guy said, well, you're going about it the wrong way. You got to check out Blue Train and Soul Train and Training In and Giant Steps. So he gave me all those records. And I was like, oh my God. I mean, it was amazing. And then I started really loving Coltrane's sound. And I would say to my mom, who couldn't have cared less. I mean, she was very supportive, but how do I get that sound? I can't get that sound. Listen to the way he gets that high C to come out and that middle C. How does he do that? And my mom would just say, I don't know, just keep practicing.
Has your choice in instrument, Frank, has it affected the way that you view different genres of music in any way? Playing the bassoon, has that affected how you view music at all?
Well, I'd say I had a natural love for music before I realized that would end up being my career. And some of that, again, came from my experiences in music education, playing a piece of music and thinking, wow, like not knowing anything about it, but hearing it, being in the middle of it, even in, you know, when you're at a younger age with younger ensembles, and thinking, I really love that. Like, you know, so my entry into it was, well, my first entry into it would have been more popular music, what was on the radio, including doo-wop when I was a little kid, but, you know, because I'm probably, I guess, older than your dad, but, you know, I'm going to be 70. So I lived from the 50s. So the whole second half of the 20th century.
You're actually younger than him, Frank.
Oh, okay. All right. And, and then, like Keith said, into the Beatles, all the rock and roll stuff. My knowledge of jazz was more the old timers, like I said, or someone who was then was current, like a Stan Getz. That's what I knew. I didn't know from really even Charlie Parker or Coltrane when I was a kid. You know, and my parents didn't listen to that kind of music. And classical music was, you know, like we had music education and we had at that time television, very different than now. And, you know, classical music in my house was whoever showed up as an act on the Ed Sullivan Show. Might be Beverly Sills, might be Richard Tucker, it might be Nureyev and Fontaine dancing the balcony scene from Romeo and Juliet or something, you know, I mean, so whatever we knew, what I knew from the classical world, other than what I learned in school, if you want to call it classical arts, was kind of TV, you know, and those things were available to us on regular TV, the regular stations, not even PBS kind of station necessarily. And I loved singers, you know, like a Frank Sinatra or Ella Fitzgerald. I love that sound. So I would say that's what I appreciate in all kinds of music that way. And so when I first listened more to jazz, the later kind of Coltrane kind of stuff would not have hit me that much. I was much more tapped into Blue Train or So What with Miles Davis, or, you know, where things had slowed down a little bit, and I had more appreciation for that than some of the Charlie Parker stuff, or different, but also more dense in a way, like later Coltrane kind of stuff. I love any kind of music that's well played, well performed. When you hear anything great, it's great.
Interested, Keith, what is it that you think that it is about Coltrane that makes him so revered as both a jazz legend, but maybe also as a cultural legend?
I think the jazz legend part is what he accomplished. I mean, there are recordings of him that go back as early as 1946, but he was pretty much an unknown guy, and he didn't really sound that great on those recordings. And then, you know, he played with all these singers, and he was in Dizzy's band for a while, and played with Johnny Hodges and Earl Bostic, but he really wasn't noticed until he joined Miles in the mid-50s. And what he did from that point to the 12 years or 11 years or so until he passed away, constantly changing. And he did so much, he attacked so many issues in the music. I mean, he almost left nothing for anybody else to deal with, you know, and he did it to the highest level. So he was constantly changing music. I mean, just to give you an example, a guy I know who knew that I had a number of Coltrane recordings, had called me up once and he said, I'm looking for live recordings, but they got to be February or March of 1962. And he was very cued into what he was looking for, and he knew that either side of that was a different story. I mean, Train was constantly changing. He changed the music rhythmically, he changed it harmonically for sure. He changed it texturally. His solos were, I mean, you know, where Charlie Parker was playing a few minutes, Coltrane was known to play into the hours, you know, 1 hour, 2 hour solos. And in fact, Elvin Jones said there was one thing, they were supposed to do 2 shows. And he said, I don't know what happened to John, but he got so worked up. We played one piece for 3 hours and Coltrane played the whole time. So yeah, it's physically and mentally, it's unbelievable, you know? And so I think that, you know, musicians tapped into this, and of course, then you get everybody else trying to play for 3 hours that can't say anything. I mean, they're done in 10 minutes, you know, or 5 minutes or 3 minutes. But so I think that's part of it. And you know, the cultural thing is so, you're talking about like how so many people relate to him. I find that the oddest thing, and I'm not sure if he was around today that it would be the same story, but I find it so odd because he was, when it came to commercialism and doing things commercially, that guy wasn't about that at all. So it's amazing to me that anything happened, you know, in that cultural regard, because he wasn't about that. I mean, he lost much of his audience by 1965. You know, he's playing Ascension and Meditations and all that late stuff. Which I absolutely love that stuff. But, you know, I would say that, you know, probably 90 out of 100 people that would hear that would say, I can't deal with that. And understandably so, because he's really turned his back on much of European tradition in there. I think it was a struggle with him all the time. I mean, if you listen to live recordings and then listen to what he's doing in the studio at the same time, it seems like the studio is lagging behind where he is live. And I've read interviews where I think he was concerned about people and reaching people, but at some point he just couldn't wait anymore, you know. But I think the concern was definitely there for him. But like I say, there seems to be a lag between the live stuff and what was going on in the studio at the same time. The studio always seems a little bit more tame to me.
Keith, when you came, actually stayed at our house a number of years ago, Beth and I were, my family, we were out of town. Didn't you go out to Long Island? Was that the Coltrane's house?
Yeah, that was I think that was like July 4th weekend of 2006. Yeah, we went out to Long Island and we visited his home, which at that point was not open to the public. And, you know, of course, went to the gravesite. Anyway, the guy that gave me the tour was, I don't know if he was a city council guy or not, but a friend of ours knew him, and he agreed to spend some time. He gave us like 2 hours of time. We actually went to his last home. And, you know, it was in total disrepair. You know, I remember him telling me we were going to go up to the room that Coltrane had above his garage, you know, where he disappeared for 5 days and came up with a Love Supreme. And I was like trembling, you know, and the guy said, I don't know, we probably shouldn't go up there because, you know, animals have gotten up into the rafters and all kind, you know, he said it just reeks up there, and he said it probably isn't a good idea. And I said, I don't care if it's underwater, I want to go up there. So we went up, and he gave me, he had some surgical masks, the masks like we're wearing today, you know. And we went up there. I cried. I mean, it was like the original carpet and floors, and the bathroom was the same. He even showed me Coltrane's toothbrush holder, which for the time was pretty advanced. It kind of went into the wall. And I couldn't, I mean, it was so heavy, you know, being in that room. I was like crying. It was just, it was ridiculous. And then my friend took me to the gravesite. And again, same thing. It was very emotional. And then they were going to take me to the hospital, but I couldn't handle that. You know, where Coltrane had driven himself on July 16th, I guess. He died the 17th of July, 67. I think he had driven himself there. It was either the 16th or early 17th. He drove himself to the hospital and died. And I couldn't do that. It was already too heavy for me. So I only saw the gravesite and the last house, but that was enough.
That's an incredible story, Keith. And I never knew that he drove himself to the hospital. Although now that I hear that, I'm not all that surprised after learning a lot about John. Especially, I think it was maybe in the documentary Chasing Train. I don't know if you've ever seen that. I can't remember.
10 times.
I'm sorry.
At least 10 times, yes.
It I can't remember which one of his colleagues had said it, but was talking about how often he practiced, and when people were like, you know, the gig was over, they were ready to go and leave and just be done for the night, he'd be in the bathroom practicing, or between sets he'd be practicing in the hotel room. Even when people complained about the sound of him playing the sax, he would then just do the keys, figure out the keys to practice. Like, he was nonstop practicing. There's just like a person who has such perseverance and is willing to just be applied to something. It doesn't surprise me that he drove himself to the
Well,
hospital.
I don't think he shared his illness with people. The first person, those were two different guys. The guy that talked about the restroom practicing, that was Benny Golson. The guy that was talking about him not wanting to disturb people in the hotel, that was Jimmy Heath. I had a friend who saw Coltrane live number of times with Miles Davis. He was friends with Cannonball, and he said that he said one night Coltrane showed up in a cab. He was in the back of a cab practicing, and he walked into the place practicing. He said he played furiously for this entire set, and then he goes into the bathroom and practices. And my friend didn't relate to Coltrane's playing, but he loved Cannonball. This was with Miles's group, and he told Cannonball, he said, "Man, I love your playing, Cannon, but that other guy," he said, "I can't stand him." And he said, Cannonball said, "Oh man, you need to keep coming back, because that other guy that you don't like is a damn genius."
How important teaching itself has been in your life, and how, and if at all, that has been, you know, you've been able to use that to kind of grow in your own lifestyle, in your own life, as a musician, or just as a person?
Well, I could honestly say that it's different, but I get an equal level of satisfaction from teaching as I do from performing. And I've performed all over the world. And I mean, some of the most enjoyable playing I've ever done was in the living room with our son and my wife at the piano. I mean, so I don't care if I played at the White House or at Carnegie Hall. You know, I mean, there are things that matter to you, right? That go beyond what a more glittery experience. And the thing about, well, first of all, I do feel like I owe everything to my teacher. Now, I don't feel that I have that effect on every one of my students, or it's even necessary. I became very close to him, and unbeknownst to me, he envisioned me as his successor. And I was. I mean, at least I tried to fill his shoes. And he was like one of the deans of, like, one of the great players and teachers in the world. And it's like, here, Sonny, here's the keys. Good luck, you know, with the business. And as much audacity as I might have had, or, you know, thought I was, you know, hot dog when I was younger, I never dreamed of that. But he, so, you know, I always like to say that, because some teachers take this do this differently, is you're there for the students, they're not there for you. And in our business, which is performance, the students don't show up to please me. I'm there to help them in their journey, back to the journey again, you know? And I love and I also am awed by the responsibility of being part of their life absolutely, these are kids coming out of high school in my case, or in college and pursuing a degree. And they're really depending upon me, you know, but I don't turn it around egotistically, like I made them, you know, without me, they're nothing. I'll say that to them sometimes when I'm busting their chops, but they know I'm kidding. But I always say every teacher's room should have on the wall where you could read it all the time, it's not about you. And also, like, my teacher was pivotal in my life. And I know at any moment I might serve that purpose for one of my students. And sometimes it's an offhand remark. A student say, "Mr. Morelli, do you remember the time you said to me?" Because that meant a lot. Either, you know, straighten up and fly right, or, you know, I believe in you. I think you're great. That's usually what they're hearing from me. That makes a difference, because they need that. And I don't remember saying it. You know, it's not like cinematic. And at that moment in the film score, I believe in you, you, Luke, I am your father. It's not, it just happens. It just happens. Or someone says to your mother, that's the most talentless clarinet student, right? No, I mean, yes, teaching, I am grateful to be a teacher. I feel in my field, our field, the music field, meaning Keith and I, the way you pass this on is person to person.
I appreciate you saying that, Frank. I also found it mind-blowing that students call you Mr. Morelli, because I hear the same thing on a daily basis, and it just dawned on me that that's probably happening on a daily basis at the same time sometimes. What about you, Keith? How much has teaching enriched your life?
Well, it's first of all, it's Dr. Morelli. Dr. Morelli.
That is true.
But anyway, it's interesting. I have a hard time with that term teacher, and I have a hard time with administrators. When I had an administrator, she was not very good, and I remember telling her that assistant principal is a meaningless term, like teacher. I said Charlie Parker is really something, but the reason I have a problem with the teacher thing, for me, is I never know what's going to be happening. I mean, there are so many times where I feel like I'm the student because there's really sharp kids. And I got to tell you, when Frank was in town, I don't know if it was right. He was there right before we did our recording. But he was there a few months before. But at one of those times, Susan, his prior student, my wife, said, Frank's giving a master class, a bassoon master class. You want to go? And I said, yeah. And we go there. And one of the concepts he was sharing with the students about breathing and how you support, and this idea of it really being kind of all around from front to back, you should feel this expansion. It's like it's something I had never really thought about. And so I started using that for myself. And before I know it, I'm starting to tell my kids the Frank Morelli message, but it's coming from him. So, and then there were some other things too. There was a thing about the Mozart bassoon concerto that affected me, something I didn't know. And the same thing happens with the teaching. Like Frank, I feel like I want to do both of them. And I need both of them because either one of them is going to drive me crazy just doing that. And it's nice to have the balance of both of those things, I guess, for lack of a better word, teaching and playing. But I got to tell you, there are so many times I will share something with a student to only find out the student has dug just a little bit deeper than me. And it's happened already numerous times this year. And in fact, one particular student, it's happened many times with. His name is Alan Jones. And I can't wait to show up to class to see what I'm going to learn today from the guy. And there's a very selfish thing for me. And I always tell my kids, if we get to the end of the year and I haven't learned from you guys, I'm going to be highly disappointed. So, and it never fails. There's always something that is pointed out. It can be something really simple that I missed, or something quite deep that a kid has really investigated. So it's a great environment to be in.
I just love everything you said, both of you guys. And I just wanted to just chime in my own little experience, because I kind of fell into teaching. In fact, I tried to avoid teaching for a pretty good portion of my life, because I watched my mom be a teacher, and I saw the things, all the weight that she carried. I saw how she didn't make a huge amount of money. And I fell into it because I was working in publishing. Right at the beginning of this chat, I told you I called Frank Morelli from this publishing company, and I absolutely hated it every second of that job. Sat on the subway in New York one day and just saw the sign for teaching fellowships, and I was like, I'm going to just try something different. Even though I knew in my mind that, I was afraid to stand up in front of people and had all these little hang-ups about being a teacher. And when I wound up getting into it, I realized it was nothing like what I expected. And in fact, Keith, exactly right. I feel like a learner more than a person who's giving information every single day. And in fact, they're the most satisfying moments of being a teacher. I love how you mentioned the idea of balance too, and how you know, creating things is difficult, whether it's music or you know, visual art or you're writing. It takes a toll on you in good and probably bad ways too. I guess sleep is probably not something that you all get a chance to enjoy that often. But having the balance of being able to come in and share what I know or my experiences and then learn about myself from the reflections sitting in front of me is incredible. The other thing I find really interesting is that we all teach different levels of school. I currently teach 8th grade, but I've been teaching in middle school for about, this is my 18th year teaching. And Keith, I know you teach, you're a high school teacher, and Frank, you're teaching in college. But there's so many things that we just kind of connected with. I mean, being an educator, even if you're not traditionally in a classroom being an educator, just being somebody who is able to teach people about themselves or about things that you know that they might not, it is just absolutely the greatest thing that you can ever do. Changes you as a person. There's no doubt about it. I can 100% say without a doubt that I've become a better person since I've been a teacher. Tell us a little bit about the Oxmo incident.
Here, I'll see. This is, I got a little bit of shine, so I'll put it a little bit to the side. That's what it looks like. And you can see we're up to no good.
There's clearly an incident taking place there. What kinds of things should we be expecting to hear on this album?
Well, from Keith, really great saxophone playing. That much I can tell you.
Oh, come on. Frank sounds gorgeous on it. Unbelievable. And it's kind of a mix of the classical and the jazz traditions, but not in the sense of a third stream type album. And it was really, I mean, we spent a lot of time preparing for this. I think I spent more time on this probably than any other project. And in some ways it was, it may have been the most meaningful too, you know, and then also the friendship that came out of this was, it's like one of those unexpected things you talk about. I mean, I knew Frank, we had met, but I didn't really know Frank. And now I do. And for better or worse.
Exactly.
Don't take that the way I meant it, Frank.
Right.
Anyway, it was just simply one of the greatest experiences for me, and the music is really dear to my heart, and you know, I mean, it was 16 months. Well, no, actually, it was longer than that. It was 16 months since it was recorded, but then we were another 6. It's almost two solid years, just shy of 2 years. And I think we started talking about it
on my birthday,
March 31st. Yeah,
my birthday 2 years ago.
Right. Yeah, so it's been almost 2 years, and now it's out. It will actually come out in June, but and Frank and I went back and forth, phone calls. He even flew out here. We had a rehearsal with the guys. And we went in and recorded it all in one day, and then we had the project of trying to get it mixed and mastered, which, you know, took some time, and there was a lot that went into this. It was really quite a journey.
You know, you could tell. I mean, you could say, you know, you're talking about stretching or even doing things for your own reasons, not necessarily thinking about, I'm going to write a book that'll become a movie, or I'm going to make a record that's going to sell, it'll be a platinum record, you know, whatever it is. For me, I spent my life playing classical music. I got involved as a backup guy, a sideman, classical sideman, not a jazz sideman with certain jazz artists, you know, some recordings or live performances, but a lot of classical musicians, a lot of bassoon players get that opportunity. So I wasn't alone in that. But I started on the sax, and I loved that, and I loved. Yeah, I mean, I was not at all a jazz kind of player, but I loved tunes. I loved playing my sax and just playing tunes. No sophistication, no knowledge, just out of love, singing on my instrument, singing beautiful music on my instrument. That was like the thing. So here I am towards the end of my career, and this opportunity comes along to do something that really I'm not trained for. And after that rehearsal that Keith mentioned, where my wife and I were coming out just to be in, it turned out we could be in Denver because we were going actually to a wedding of a family member, and we made it into a vacation to go up the Rocky Mountains, all that kind of thing. So brought the bassoon, and we had this rehearsal, and fortunately we could record a bunch of stuff. And then I practiced all summer, and I would contact Keith, and I would send him recordings of me playing. So he was teaching me all summer. He was coaching me all summer. And I had to get up to some sort of speed. I can't keep up with these guys, but I had to get up to some sort of speed to warrant me being in the same studio with them, playing music that I love and have a certain affinity for, but not the skill level of these guys. But I felt like, and I hope, also for their sake, but they could always know where to place the blame. I mean, anyone listening to it, that I met the grade, But there is something liberating about the fact is I thought, if I don't do this now, I'll never do it.
He literally transformed himself from that July rehearsal till when we recorded, because we were all shocked. And Frank did his homework. And Frank actually helped me. There were a couple of more classical things. So Frank spent some time helping me with that. We were both sort of, struggling with each other's genres a little bit. And we were both trying to save each other, but I would have never had the guts to try to do a classical record. I don't think I have it in me, but maybe I'm wrong. But Frank, I always looked up to Frank, that he took this on and did such a great job with it. And it was great to be part of this. It was a fun, it was a really fun project, and it was certainly a highlight in my life.
That's one of my favorite messages from this entire conversation that I really hope my readers out there will hear. The idea that you created something, or you decided to be involved in a venture for the sake of that venture and for your own reasons. And I don't feel like people don't do enough of that. A lot can come out of that. You both learn from each other. You both grew from each other. And you have an album that you're putting out that I'm sure is going to just be absolutely incredible, knowing both of the talent levels of the two gentlemen sitting in front of me. So, I mean, I just hope that people out there hearing that message right there will realize, hey, when you want to do something, the time to do it is now. Thank you for chatting with me today. It was awesome. Just listening to all of the stories that you had. Your knowledge of John Coltrane is incredible. Frank, just everything you had to say about teaching and how important that is to us in this world, and what you learn from it. I just love it. I hope you will go out and buy as many albums as you can from both Frank and Keith. And I hope you'll also have a chance at some point to go out and buy my book, On the Way to Birdland. You can pre-order it now. It's on Amazon.com. You can find it on bookshop.com. Really, pretty much anywhere you can look for books. If you actually go on the website for sunrisebooks.com, you can pre-order signed copies if you're interested in that. Well, I thank you, gentlemen, and I hope we have a chance to chat again soon.
Thanks so much, Frank.
All right, Frank's.